This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from around the globe. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/cinemacartography. The cinematic ideal would be to create a film which by every measurable parameter is perfect. If you were to dissect it frame by frame, then the result would be a flawlessly constructed work of art, wherein each aspect of the mise-en-scène is exactly as it needs to be at that exact moment. There are a handful of directors that fulfill this criteria as much as is humanly possible, although if I were to frame a filmmaker that embodies this sentiment the most, then it would have to be Robert Bresson.
Vous nagez vite, je vous suis à peine. Je suis mal. Je suis si bien.
The cinema of Bresson is exacting and meticulously crafted. It's difficult to find a single moment throughout all of Bresson's filmography that stands out as filler. Every frame is necessary, and it's his understanding of the poetry of details and how the language of cinema interplays with itself. There's no indulgence in his work, and by crafting a precise discipline and restriction within his own work, he was able to hold cinema to a certain standard, that even in his world saturated with despair, things need to be perfect. What distinguishes Bressonian cinema is the unique realm in which his films take place, and this is attributed to his blend of what's considered cinematic with what we consider real. Take a formalist filmmaker such as Bresson, and you would assume that he's a filmmaker which would slot into a brand of realist filmmakers that make up a large penchant of cinema's classic oeuvre. However, Bresson's stark, direct approach to individual turmoil does not lend itself immediately to the landscape of reality as we know it.
Oh, Marthe. 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 Marthe.
It does not require a close inspection of Bresson's work to realise that the unique filmmaking philosophy he employs alters the very definition of cinematic reality. The vacant, empty expressions of subjects, and indifference to human cruelty. In cinema, all of this begins with Bresson. For what Bresson aimed to do was to reclassify the very notion of cinematography. Now, the word cinematography to Bresson was not how we may use the word today. For Bresson, cinematography was how the exclusive language of cinema manifests a new form of reality that we express. By considering the precise usage of a camera and sound and montage, we move away from the real and in turn eschew the rules that come with it.
Tu appuies tantôt à gauche, tantôt à droite. Résultat.
Much of Bresson's approach is confirmed in his own writing, with the most seminal insight to his work being a collection of writings from himself titled Notes on the Cinematograph. For Bresson, there are two types of film: those that employ the use of theatre, through actors, directing, etc., and use the camera to reproduce. And then there are those that employ the uses of cinematography to create. Bresson made a distinction with how a camera should be utilised. Just using a camera did not inherently make something cinema. For there has never been a reason as to why cinema would have to replicate reality and service as a medium that operates in a natural way. The tools of cinema are not natural, and so the way a thing is supposed to look is completely superfluous. And Bresson actively opposed this reality as we know it, for that would be an impossibility to capture in cinema. And even if we were to capture it, it would mean that consequently, there would be no form of creation. Therefore, Bresson actively sought to create an entire cinematic language that was completely about re-envisioning the human experience, wherein every facet becomes controlled. The result is Bressonian cinema. Films that are clinically precise, in which there's no excess whatsoever. Films that cut straight to the heart of what they're about. With none of his 13 features over 2 hours in length, they are exactly what they aim to be. Bresson films do not feature big-name stars. There are no complex sweeping camera movements. There's no deep psychological exploration of any of his works. What you see is what is. A girl suffers, a man escapes, another pickpockets.
Rendez-moi mon portefeuille. Voulez-vous que j'appelle la police?
And the combination of unromanticized imagery tells a story that cuts deep to the often harshest elements of the human condition. And so, if there is so much removed from Bresson's methodology, what is there that's within it? When I think of the mise-en-scène of Bresson, certain images are conjured. There's a stillness within the frame. The characters move and speak at an apathetic pace, and the reserved and muted ambience creates a work of explicit, matter-of-fact storytelling.
Vous sentez-vous coupable?
Coupable?
Envers vous-même?
Coupable sans l'être. Je sais que je suis plus intelligent que les autres, plus lucide. J'ai parfaitement conscience de ma supériorité.
Bresson mastered precision and aimed to be an instrument of that precision himself. His are stories of details, and the way those details play off of one another is what guides your eye and progresses things forwards. Bresson's sequences are not of pluralities, they're singular. If there's an element of the mise-en-scène to stress in the work of Bresson, it's that within his frames there's a network wherein each element plays off of one another uniformly. The actors are as important as the lighting, which is as important as the composition, which is as important as the colouring. Nothing exceeds beyond its boundaries to take precedence over the other. If there's a word to describe the style of filmmaking that Bresson utilises, it would be equality.
Ma paroisse, ma première paroisse. En refusant d'avouer le mauvais état de ma santé, dois-je croire que je n'obéis qu'à un sentiment du devoir. Ma bicyclette me rend beaucoup de service, mais je ne puis monter les côtes à jeun, surtout sans d'horribles malaises.
Each element, from a macro to micro scale within a Bresson film, is the same as the previous and the following. For instance, if you were to take two completely different moments from two completely different films, what you're likely to find is that their mood, their pacing, their levels of drama are exactly the same, subdued. A Bresson scene is likely to be made of an insistence to never alter the atmosphere that the film creates, which is why his work seems to carry such an inevitability to it. Bresson's work continually moves forward to its finale, and if there's one absolute defining aspect of his work, then I would have to refer to it as the Bressonian rhythm. Any element that stands out disrupts and alters that rhythm, as no matter what occurs on or off of the screen, nothing within the diegetic space of the film seems to waver. High drama remains silent, and the reaction of any person present is empty. This removal of excess is central to Bresson's manner of directing, because it was not just a fortunate mistake. Bresson was conscious in developing a de-dramatized form of cinema. Bresson never aimed for any kind of subversion or restructuring of cinematic aesthetics. Rather, he simply aimed to add greater clarity to what was already there. Rather than inserting an element that would tell us what's happening, he allowed space for all elements to breathe and allow the real truth to emerge, with each element of his films in equal measure. Bresson's shots are not empty. If anything, he directs us through looks and actions and gazes to the most important area of that frame. He shows us only the most important information to that character, and we get a sense of how they view the world through their most important details. It's why details and gestures are so important within a Bresson film, because everything within the frame becomes an object or a tool. Close-ups of hands reveal so much about the actions a person takes, or perhaps does not take. Somewhere within the universes of his stories, there exists a precise spot in space, wherein the detail of the unfolding story is told in its most concentrated form. That is the nature of Bresson. A movement or an object under his complete control, minimized to its most bare form that tells us everything that we need to know. Every action on display in a Bresson film is a microcosm of the entire story at play. For an artist that works with nothing can work with everything, but an artist that works with everything cannot work with nothing. And this is why Bresson is often thought of as a minimalist filmmaker. Even though his films are dense, it's the exclusion of unnecessary details that summarizes his work. Even to examine the dueling forces of visual and oral exposes his tenacity in eschewing all that need not be there. For Bresson, a sound should never come to the rescue of an image, just as an image should never come to the rescue of a sound. If one element can tell the story, use it. Even when sound is used to instigate the story in Bresson, the image will never fall second to it. A character's gaze toward the sound will be as rich, and vice versa. Though perhaps the most notable aspect of Bresson's work in separating from reality through de-dramatization comes with his actors, although Bresson himself referred to them as his models. The process in which Bresson directed his actors is almost antithetical to how we envision the actor-director relationship. Much like his control over the mise-en-scène, Bresson employed the very same control to his actors, treating them as if they were any other object in the scenery. His aim was to make everything that his actor did exactly as he wanted it to be, with absolutely zero input from them whatsoever. Actors in Bresson films have no room for improvisation, experimentation, or even thought. It's to be accomplished one way, and the movement is automatic. Bresson's models must be in a mode wherein they don't feel as though they have the ability to be dramatic, as that interferes with the film's atmosphere, makes one element more salient than the other, and thus the established Bressonian rhythm changes. It's a methodical process where each thing is exactly in its place. He used the term model, because an actor seems as though they're one thing, whereas a model simply is that thing. They're a vessel to instigate the actions and circumstances of a story. Models are automatic. Everything that they say and do is measured, timed, rehearsed endlessly. Then they're dropped into the middle of the events of the film. Bresson's actors speak as if they're speaking to themselves, in monologues rather than dialogues, and Bresson uses our impatience at the anticipation for an emotional catharsis to reinforce his Bressonian rhythm. An act of deep consequence is viewed, and the acknowledgement is non-existent.
T'adoras.
For an actor does not speak the language of what Bresson called cinematography. It's not that there's a disdain for actors that fueled his opposition to them, rather his distinctive perception of how the art of cinema is to be achieved, that there's almost a sacred purity to it that can't be tainted. And this idea of cinema as a pure art form lends itself to so many other facets within Bresson's work, and it probably was the leading reason as to why he never reused his actors, because they'd been spoiled and were no longer the untarnished soul that they were when they began the project. Bresson in fact believed that if he reused an actor, then they would look at themselves in the first film as they would look in a mirror, in a sense that is the way that people would anticipate for them to look, and ultimately impose upon themselves a discipline to do exactly that. Cinema for Bresson is a pure form of expression, one whose approach must come with the acceptance that the exploration of such will result in a tainting of those elements, because the work of Bresson ultimately deals with subjects whose primary kinship is a world that's cruel and is very often inhabited by those that are passive to such evils. And being a very religious man himself, his work is fueled by these moments and themes of greater divinity. Many of his characters have resemblance towards a Christ-like symbol. They're vessels of some kind of sacrifice, maybe a sacrifice that maintains the balance of this world. The tragedies are never highlighted, and they never disrupt the Bressonian rhythm. The sacrifice is what keeps the rhythm in check.
Écoutez ça, le vieille bête.
Je ne te veux que du bien. Toi, tu es mauvaise. C'est sûrement faute de comprendre. Tu as le mal dans tes yeux.
Bresson wanted at one point to make a film on the book of Genesis. There's always been the idea within Bresson's life and work of attributing existence to a life in sin. This doesn't mean that his work is cynical or misanthropic. However, the exploration of a life as a predestined path can offer some fleeting manner of acceptance, that death and suffering is in some way beautiful, for it's part of the balance of life. Everything works in tandem with one another, maintaining the world at its equilibrium, precisely the way that Bresson made films. And so when we see the attitude of Bresson towards making sad or hopeless work, we must view it through a much more sacred point of view. In a Bresson film, the acceptance of cruelty and the brazen manner in which it's displayed removes any kind of metaphoric lens. Interpretation falls to the wayside in favour of unambiguous fact. The suffering of a child cannot be extrapolated much further beyond the realm of pain, and without this interpretive domain, images are read as they appear, and everything unfolds in a narrative that's almost destined to happen, which begins to explain both technically and conceptually the immovable nature of the Bressonian rhythm. Bresson's methodology is to establish an unceasingly moving world so as to create this movement towards inevitability, the distinct outlier being in A Man Escaped, where our protagonist is actually able to take his destiny into his own hands. Interestingly enough, this Bresson film is directly adapted from a real-life account.
Leurs gestes étaient pareils. Ils allaient et venaient le long du mur. Rarement ils en atteignaient l'angle, jamais ils ne le dépassaient.
The films of his that are original or adaptations of other works deal with characters that have no agency in the changing of their fates. He restricted his narrative views to tell first-person stories that are based in worlds in which a divine hand has cast an absolute certainty on the unfolding scenarios. The only film that goes against this grain is the one film based on real life. Because although Bresson is placed within a pantheon of cinema's masters, his work remains parallel to much of the growing story of cinema. Mimesis is at the heart of catharsis. Our recognition of events in an Aristotelian sense is what allows us to recognise and empathise with events of high drama. Yet Bresson's aim was to achieve the antithesis of replication, and so the very basis of Bresson's cinema is in fact work that's very uncinematic. If we could express things clearly, then we wouldn't make art. Bresson's cinema actively aimed for a refining of the language of cinema that we already had, perfecting it to its most distilled elements. The further from reality he strayed, the closer he was to his ideal.
C'est vrai que quelque chose nous pousse contre ce que nous sommes.
Il faut marcher, marcher.
On marche pour ne pas être celui qui on se pète toujours.
Qui est-ce donc qui s'amuse à tourner en dérision l'humanité?
Oui, qui nous manœuvre en douce?
Le diable, probablement.
For Robert Bresson, life was a divine thing, and the misery pervading through its pores, whether we addressed it or not, would occur. His work does not beautify nor uglify. He does not denature the essence of what appears on screen. We are all part of some divine plan, which may within our perspective be a horrifying prospect. But it is what it is, and things will be exactly as they're supposed to be. And in the mind of Bresson, our art should reflect that. It should never replicate the details of reality, but rather be a mirror for the transcendental and metaphysical plane that is our very existence, to keep returning back to the equilibrium, the constant Bressonian rhythm. We'd like to thank Mubi for sponsoring this video. Mubi is a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from around the globe. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there's always something new to discover. And with Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected, so you can create your own brand of a cinema viewing experience, available to stream anytime, anywhere. Right now on Mubi, you can watch the entirety of Kingdom, Lars von Trier's absurdist miniseries anthology, including its third and final entry, Kingdom Exodus. With its supernatural phenomena, dark humour, and strange occurrences all unfurling within the walls of a neurosurgical ward, it's hard to miss the opportunity to watch something as original and surreal as this. You can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/cinemacartography. That's mubi.com/cinemacartography for a whole month of great cinema for free.